the craziest lawsuits that won big money. Have you ever been walking through the grocery store when you notice a large puddle on the floor? Although there's no wet floor sign, to most, this seems like something you should avoid. But if you are feeling extra opportunistic, this could be a big payday. And all it would require is you to hurt yourself really bad or to put on a really good performance. Now, nobody gets paid for hurting themselves, but you can get paid if you're in a place and it's reasonably expected that this place will be safe for you to use. Then if it's not, you may have the opportunity to file a lawsuit. And while this system exists to protect entities and individuals, it's not always used in such a benevolent way. Which is why today we're not only discussing the craziest lawsuits, but crazy lawsuits that won big money. Let's begin. Richard Overton versus Anheuser-Busch. In 1991, a man named Richard Overton was a simple, blue-collar, working-class man. And what does every simple, blue-collar, working-class man love? A good beer at the end of the day. And maybe even during the day. And for a lot of people, Bud Light is the beer of choice. Now, Bud Light is obviously a consumer product. And like all consumer products, they come with interesting and fun commercials. Most commercials and advertisements try to portray a certain lifestyle or a certain emotional response when it comes to a product to try to give a product emotional weight in somebody's head, helping promote a purchasing decision. For example, if you're trying to sell a fancy watch, you might put it on a fancy looking person in a fancy looking house driving a fancy looking car. A great example of this is watch any perfume or cologne commercial. Like, there's literally a Christian Dior perfume commercial that is just Johnny Depp playing the guitar with wolves in the desert. You're gonna see it on screen, but that's just what I remember from the top of my head. Regardless, ads and marketing are supposed to be fun and creative and make you feel cool and look cool, right? Well, not always. And in this case, Richard Overton felt like Anheuser-Busch, the maker of Bud Light, specifically betrayed him. In 1991, Bud Light was running advertising campaigns that specifically portrayed glamorous lifestyles, beaches, attractive women, all in association with Bud Light. And these ads, to some, imply that drinking Bud Light would result in a similar experience, which I guess you could say is more or less not unreasonable, but I think most would just assume that, yeah, okay, they want to make this beer look cool, I get it, but not to Richard Overton. Richard Overton thought that drinking this beer would make you cool. It would give you the glamorous lifestyle. It would put you on a beach somehow, and beautiful women would simply flock to you because you were drinking it. But because that didn't happen, he wasn't only disappointed, he was furious. So furious, in fact, that he decided to hire a lawyer and sue Anheuser-Busch. Now here's the deal. Believe it or not, Richard Overton was actually able to find a lawyer who was willing to take the situation, which just goes to show that there are hungry lawyers out there, you know, Better Call Saul type of guys. And the legal claim that Richard and his lawyer ended up making was that the ads were falsely advertising a lifestyle, and due to this, Richard Overton suffered emotional distress and mental injury because the promised lifestyle he saw was never materialized. At this point, this sounds like a fake joke, but I promise you it's not. And even if the story ended there, it would already be crazy enough. But it doesn't, because obviously he won money. And while it's not the biggest money in the world, it's sizable enough to add it to this list. Once this lawsuit was filed, the ridiculousness of it alone was enough to spark media attention, causing a lot of negative publicity about marketing and specifically Bud Light. Which is why, although Bud Light would have had a very easy case to win here, they decided to settle with Richard Overton for $10,000 cash. Not because they thought that he was right, but because they wanted the attention to die down, and they figured if they gave him 10 grand, he would shut up and go about his life. And well, that's exactly what happened. And like I said, $10,000 definitely isn't nothing, but compared to some of the money that people get in the other cases in this video, it looks like chump change. And I'm really curious if he truly felt this way or if he just wanted to see if he could get some money. Okay, editor's note here. I actually was just going through and finalizing this and realized when I was doing some additional research that this actually didn't get paid out. Literally, this $10,000 was not paid out. The case was actually dismissed. And keep in mind, this case happened in 1991. Even as far as 2007, he was still doing interviews trying to get this money out of Anheuser-Busch. The same $10,000 almost 20 years later. So yeah, my bad. I wanted to definitely make sure I added this in. He actually didn't win a little bit of money. He wanted no money, but you know what? It's already in the video now. It's a funny story, but okay, the rest of them were actually winning big money. And the money in each section is only going to get bigger and bigger. Cleanthi Peters versus Universal Studios. In the last case, we discussed advertising being too misleading because it was not true to the expectation. But in this case, we're almost experiencing the exact opposite. Because in this case, Cleanthi Peters, a 57-year-old woman at the time, took her 10-year-old granddaughter to the haunted Halloween house in Universal Studios looking to get a fright, but ended up getting much more than they bargained for. I'm man enough to say that I don't have a huge tolerance for scary stuff. I've never really done haunted houses, I've never really wanted to, and I'm generally scared of most things. So already I feel a bit sympathetic towards this case. But I will say, being somebody who is sensitive to scary things, I know to stay away from haunted houses. But maybe that's just me, because obviously Cleanthi Peters did not share the same mindset. So here's the situation. The story, according to Cleanthi Peters, goes as follows. Cleanthi and her granddaughter both enter the Halloween Horror Nights haunted house, and things start off relatively normal. But then it went downhill fast. And Cleanthi Peters, specifically what her problem was that there was a costumed man dressed with a fake chainsaw that was allegedly chasing her around, making threatening motions, and doing so in such a degree that it not only caused severe emotional trauma, but even caused her physical injury as she was attempting to escape this chainsaw-wielding maniac. It's not stated what happened after this initial experience, but my assumption is that she collected her granddaughter, left the park, and then went ahead to find her Better Call Saul lawyer. And once she had this lawyer, her official argument was that she claimed that the attraction went too far and failed to ensure safety, especially regarding people with medical conditions or anxiety disorders. Now here's the deal. This is actually somewhat reasonable, and I'm not gonna just dunk on this person for the sake of entertainment. I think that there's a very real chance that there could have been, a person working in a haunted house that was taking it too far, maybe getting handsy or aggressive. That's totally possible. But my assumption is that's not the case, and this is more or less of a situation of somebody maybe being somewhere they shouldn't have been. Cleanthi actually ended up taking this to court, and she was awarded, drumroll please, $15,000. And the court and jury decided that even though Cleanthi was at a horror-themed attraction, there definitely needs to be a line in safety standards that are enforced. And with Cleanthi winning this case, it actually resulted in the park reevaluating their safety standards and even their waiver systems. And whether or not they made positive or negative changes, that I can't report. Although they did pay Cleanthi $15,000 for being a little too spooky. Kathleen Robertson versus a Texas furniture store. Kathleen Robertson was a young mother of one and lived in the suburbs of Austin, Texas. Her husband worked throughout the day and she was a stay-at-home mother. So during the day, her and her 3-year-old son at the time would go out and run errands from time to time. On the fateful day of the incident we're talking about, Kathleen brought her 3-year-old son to a furniture store to look for a brand new couch for their home. But this unassuming trip to the furniture store was actually going to turn catastrophic very soon. The story states that during her time furniture shopping, Kathleen was looking at different couches and price tags when she was walking from couch to couch until she tripped over an object and ended up twisting her ankle and falling. Because Kathleen sustained such a serious injury while furniture shopping, she sued. But the twist is this: that object that she tripped on was actually her own 3-year-old son, who was running around the store like a bull in a china shop. Kathleen argued that the store was negligent and argued that the staff should have had better control over the store's environment. If your blood is already boiling, it gets better. In court, the jury actually awarded Kathleen $80,000. Not only did this spark outrage in some, but it also caused the furniture store to go under, closing a small family business. But that's not the worst of the situation. The worst part about this entire situation is actually that it's not real. That's right. That's why I refer to this as the story. This popular urban legend of Kathleen Robertson, who tripped and fell over her own son suing the store for 80 grand, is not real. And I wanted to add it to this list about real situations for the following reason. When I was doing research for this video, one thing I found was that there was a very popular piece of chainmail known as the Stella Awards email. It was basically like a text chain copy pasta email that you would share around of the craziest lawsuits or the Stella Awards. Why they call it the Stella Awards is something I'll explain in a later section. But basically, there was a huge email that was going around specifically full of 7 frivolous lawsuits that supposedly won. One of the most famous fake stories from this email was the story of the man named Terrence Dickinson from Pennsylvania who broke into a house to burglarize it and went in the garage, but he actually ended up getting stuck in the garage, and because he was trapped in the garage, once he was let out when the family got home from vacation, he sued them and won $500,000. I've personally heard the story through word of mouth, and if you have too, you've been told a lie. But that's not where the situation ends. This piece of chainmail with 7 fake stories isn't just interesting. It's actually manipulative, because it's highly speculated that this fake email chain that was viral during the early 2000s was actually used to help lobby in favor of corporations against the American people. Here's what I mean. During the early 2000s, this viral email chain was going around claiming that these 7 real lawsuits won and that they were crazy and wow, our legal system is so messed up. But right after this Stella Awards email went viral, there was a wave of lobbying that took place on behalf of huge corporations and insurance companies to reform the legal system, specifically involving lawsuits from individuals. And because of this perfect timing, it's highly speculated and borderline confirmed that these 7 fake stories was deliberate propaganda to make the average American individual think that juries in personal injury cases were simply untrustworthy and too frivolous, and because of that, reform needed to happen. And even though these insane, frivolous cases not only didn't win money but didn't exist, in the minds of the American people, it seemed like their justice system was just falling apart, and for that reason, it made sense to reform it so that these people weren't able to steal from corporations, when in reality, these corporations and insurance companies were only lobbying to steal your rights. I'm gonna get off my soapbox now, but when doing research for this video, I thought this was too interesting not to include, which is why I wanted to lead you into it with a story that sounds believable and also blood-boiling, but in reality, it's actually corporate American propaganda to steal your rights. Woodrow Thompson versus his neighbor's dog. Woodrow Thomas lived in a nice community in Seattle, Washington, although he had one issue, an issue that he couldn't stand anymore, an issue that most of us can probably relate to. Woodrow's neighbor had a very loud dog. Admittedly, I also have a dog, a small, little, yappy dog that definitely annoys everybody in my neighborhood. And I'm sure a few of you can relate as well. I say this to make the point that loud, barking dogs aren't necessarily a rarity, especially in populated suburban areas. But I guess to Woodrow, the barking had simply gotten too excessive. Denise Norton, Woodrow's neighbor, had a dog named Cawper. And Cawper, according to Woodrow, barked excessively. But Woodrow didn't just claim that Cawper barked excessively, Woodrow claimed that the dog barked to the point of being emotionally and psychologically damaging. Woodrow even went to such extremes as to claim that the dog's barking regularly reached volumes of 128 decibels, which is literally louder than a jet engine. Woodrow was claiming that his neighbor's dog, through a window, barked louder than a jet engine. So even though Woodrow's entire lawsuit seemed almost baseless and his claims seemed completely unrealistic, he still went ahead with filing the lawsuit against his neighbor. Now here's where things get interesting. As we stated, he was filing this lawsuit specifically for mental and psychological damages. But he didn't just want money for therapy or earplugs. He wanted $500,000 because of Cawper's barking. And this $500,000 lawsuit was won, but not for the reason you think. You see, when Denise Norton was served the papers, letting her know that her crazy neighbor was suing her for $500,000, she almost reasonably didn't take it seriously and just assumed that this lawsuit was fake and that it had no base in reality, so she ignored it. But unfortunately, because she never showed up in court to defend herself, Woodrow automatically won, and the judgment was the full $500,000. Because Woodrow's complaint about the barking dog was unchallenged, well, he just won by default, and he honestly probably wished he asked for more money at that point. But for Denise, the situation is devastating, because although it was definitely negligent of her to not take action on a lawsuit that was handed to her, if it's baseless, then simply challenge it and win. She would have had a very easy win here, mainly because no dogs bark louder than jet engines. But now she is trying to go through the process of having the entire situation appealed and dismissed. And right now, that is still pending. But even though $500,000 is a lot of money, it's not the most we're going to discuss on this list by a mile. Stella Liebeck versus McDonald's. Remember earlier in the plot twist when I was talking about the Stella Awards, basically the lawsuit version of the Darwin Awards? Well, the Stella Awards are named after Stella Liebeck. And the story of Stella Liebeck is one you've probably heard before. But in case you're unfamiliar, let me paint the picture. Stella Liebeck was a 79-year-old woman at the time. She was going about her normal morning routine when she drove to McDonald's, went through the drive-thru, got a coffee, and after she paid and received her coffee, she then put it between her legs, opened it, and began to drive off. But when she drove off, the coffee spilt, and she ended up receiving third-degree burns to over 16% of her body, specifically her inner thighs and groin area. And because of this, she was hospitalized for 8 days and required skin grafts. Now, originally, this case was more or less oversimplified and kind of written off as a baseless claim from somebody trying to get a paycheck. But after doing more digging, I actually kind of don't think it was that at all. But I wanted to add it because I know a lot of people think it was, and I kind of wanted to dispel that myth, or at least maybe let you make your own opinion on it. Because here are the facts. Yes, Stella bought a coffee. Yes, she put it between her legs while driving and opened it. And yes, because of this, it spilt and burned her. All of those actions were definitely not smart. So for those reasons, I definitely think that Stella played a part in this. And maybe if things would have went worse, would have been a Darwin Award winner. But here's the other side of the situation. At the time, McDonald's was serving unreasonably hot coffee. And this was proven. After Stella ended up suing McDonald's because of the intense pain and damages that her body suffered, they measured the temperatures of McDonald's coffees. And they found that these coffees were anywhere from 180 to 190 Fahrenheit, which is far above safe levels or even what any other reasonable coffee shop was brewing or serving coffee at. And that alone gave Stella's case a lot of validity. But it didn't end there, because after lawyers continued to do a deeper investigation into McDonald's hot coffee, they had discovered that over the years, McDonald's had over 700 complaints of people who have injured themselves due to McDonald's extraordinarily hot coffee. So because McDonald's was serving unreasonably hot coffee, and because hundreds of people had not only injured themselves with the coffee, but also had similar settlements with McDonald's, there was definitely a case to be made here. But this is still really only the beginning, because initially, Stella only wanted $20,000 to cover her medical bills, which is reasonable and also kind of dispels the myth that she was looking for a fat paycheck. She wasn't. She just wanted her medical bills to be covered. But McDonald's responded with, I'm not even joking, an $800 offer. Obviously, Stella was unwilling to accept this, and the jury ended up awarding $200,000 to Stella in damages, which the judge brought down to $160,000 due to Stella's partial fault in the situation. But on top of that $160,000, Stella was also awarded $2.7 million in punitive damages. And the reason why this figure is significant is because it was equivalent to 2 days of McDonald's coffee revenue. And with that, in total, Stella won $2.86 million. And of course, she didn't walk away with every single penny of it because of legal fees and taxes, but she still did extremely well in a situation that was unfortunate. But yeah, I wanted to mention this one because I think a lot of people were expecting it. I also think a lot of people are uninformed in the situation. Obviously, Stella was not being very wise in this situation. And although her poor choices ended up giving her great bodily harm, this entire situation did likely end up saving a lot of other people in the future, because after this situation, McDonald's reduced the temperature of their coffee to a reasonable temperature. And they were also held accountable and ultimately punished for offering only $800 in the entire situation. I don't think this was a money grab at all. I think Stella just wanted to be compensated for her damages. I think that she was definitely at fault for hurting herself, but I do think that it wasn't only her fault, because if the coffee was a more regular temperature, she would have not have had burns so severe they required literal skin grafts. James Hausman versus a glass door. James R. Hausman lived a simple life in Springfield, Illinois, but he had a dream. He had the dream of sailing the entire world on a cruise ship. And this was a dream that was just about to materialize, and he was doing it on a Holland America cruise. And today was the day. He appeared at the port, stepped on the cruise ship, and began traveling the 7 seas. His cruise was going well so far. He was enjoying every aspect of cruise ship life. You know, shuffleboard with old people, lunch with old people, dinner with old people, dancing with old people, bathing with old people. You know, all of the standard luxuries that a cruise ship can offer. Until one fateful day. The cruise ship that James was on had glass doors. Nothing surprising. But the glass doors on this cruise ship were automatic. And on one fateful day, when James was walking through one of the glass doors on this Holland America cruise, James was hit in the head by a glass door. As the story goes, he was simply walking through the doorway, the door was closing too fast, and it hit him in the head, causing him permanent brain damage. Here's what's interesting. After the incident where James was struck in the head by this automatic glass door, he was still able to carry out his entire 280-day world cruise. But it's reported that his brain injury left him prone to vertigo and small seizures, which are life-changing. When James initially sued the Holland America Cruise Company, the company accused Hausman of carelessly walking into the door and claimed that the incident was anomalous and not their fault. However, that's not what the jury thought. We're obviously going up in money, so it's more than the last one, but guess how much money he won? Do you have your guess? Okay. He won $21.5 million, which is absolutely insane. And I just want to say, I don't think that James was necessarily being dumb or crazy or frivolous in this exact situation. But I think the fact that such a simple mistake could cause such a huge payout is ridiculous in my opinion, which is why I thought it was worthy of this list. Although I want to make it clear, I don't think it was wrong of James to sue. If the door is faulty or too fast, or at least fast enough to cause permanent brain damage, I definitely think there's a reason to, seek compensation. But that being said, $21.5 million seems like a lot. I think this is kind of similar to the last case where there's negligence on both sides. And possibly this situation exposed the underlying issue with these glass doors that were automatic and potentially too fast or, too dangerous. Muruf Hossain versus the Metropolitan Transit Authority. Muruf Hossain was born in Bangladesh and grew up surrounded by family and friends, but as a young adult wanted to find a better life for himself. And he decided the best place to do that was in the United States of America. Muruf ended up moving to America and at the age of 24 found himself as a bicycle delivery driver working right downtown in New York City. Muruf lived a simple and ordinary life until one day of June 2017. Muruf actually had this day off and was going to another part of the city. Like most New Yorkers, he went down to the subway and was waiting on the station. But while Muruf was waiting for his train, he found himself pacing, but unfortunately found himself walking across some uneven ground, which made him feel unbalanced and caused him to fall directly on the subway tracks, the same subway that he was just waiting for. With almost no time to move and no opportunity for somebody to help, Muruf was hit by the subway, but fortunately did live, although sustaining serious injuries. Muruf had injuries to his neck, his back, his head, his arms, his legs, his hands, and the most severe of his injuries were his left foot, where all of his toes were cut off by the train. But here's where things get interesting. When first responders made it to the scene to start seeing Muruf, they assumed that he had intentionally jumped in front of the train. And because first responders had made this official claim, the Metropolitan Transit Authority, or the MTA, which I'm just going to refer to them as now, ran with this as their defense. And because they were trying to state that Muruf did this to himself, they were pressuring Muruf to settle for only $100,000. Now, Muruf was fighting an uphill battle, because not only was he permanently injured because he fell in front of the subway and was struck by it, but now he also had to prove that he didn't do it on purpose. And I think once again, I just wanted to make the point right here, this entry isn't on the list because I think Muruf's crazy or dumb or frivolous or at fault, but I think this entire situation is very dumb, crazy, and frivolous, specifically on the side of the MTA, and I thought it was still worth having it on this specific list. More or less to have a happy and satisfying ending, but we'll get there. Like I said, this entire situation took place in 2017, and it took Muruf years to fight against the MTA and their bullying and their coercion for them to just take the $100,000 offer, but he remained consistent and vigilant. And because he didn't just quickly settle for $100,000, you know, life-changing money in a lot of circumstances, he truly won big. How big, you may ask? Well, he won just under $23 million, or roughly $4.5 million per missing toe, if you're keeping track. But yeah, the jury found the MTA completely responsible and negligent to the fact that they could have implemented additional safeguards, but didn't. And because of this, Muruf was 5 toes poorer and nearly $23 million richer. And it just goes to show, if a company's willing to throw $100,000 at you just to shut you up, it's probably because they know that your case is strong and worth a lot more. Just look at Stella's case. She only wanted $20,000, but McDonald's literally only slapped her in the face with an $800 settlement offer. But because of their severe greed, they ended up paying millions because they couldn't have just honored her medical bills for the coffee that they made too hot. And in this case, if Muruf had just taken the $100,000 and settled and didn't want to fight for himself, well, he would have missed out on tens of millions of dollars. So I guess it goes to show, make sure you advocate for yourself, make sure you stand up, and make sure if you're throwing a lowball offer, you reject it and get what you're worth. Muruf was only seeking $20 million, which is a lot, but they probably could have offered him maybe 5 to settle today, and he probably would have taken it. That's still $1 million per toe. Not a bad deal. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I have some bad news. There are so many more crazy, frivolous, dumb lawsuits that didn't win that I want to discuss, but there's truly no time for it in this video. But I'll make this promise with you now. If you guys enjoyed this video and want another video about the dumbest lawsuits that never won money, leave a like or leave a comment below letting me know you want it, and I promise I'll make it. Let's say if this video gets, I don't know, 30,000 likes, I'll do it. One of these lawsuits I really want to talk about was a case where a 70-year-old man was fired from his job because the man had extreme gas and uncontrollable diarrhea, but he ended up suing the company for disability discrimination. And well, that situation is just insane, and I want to talk about it, so hopefully that video gets made. Regardless, I want to thank you guys so much for watching this video, and hopefully you enjoyed. If you want more bro in the meantime, check out the video on screen right now. It's a video about the craziest scams of all time. If you like this, you might like that as well. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, trust me, bro.